Have you ever asked yourself, why do I keep giving so much and still feel empty? Why do you bend, shrink, and silence your own needs only to be met with indifference, disrespect, or even guilt for wanting peace? If that question stirred something in you, this video is exactly what your soul has been waiting for. You see, many of us were never taught how to prioritize ourselves without guilt. We were conditioned to chase love, approval, and worth outside of ourselves, forgetting that the most sacred relationship we'll ever have is the one with ourselves. In this video, you'll discover why emotional healing often begins the moment you stop trying to be enough for others and start choosing you. You'll learn the silent ways self-betrayal shows up, the life-changing wisdom of Carl Jung, and the powerful reason why choosing yourself is not selfish. It's the most liberating act of your life. By the end, you'll walk away not just with clarity, but with a renewed sense of power, peace, and purpose. So stay with me until the very last second, because the moment you truly prioritize yourself, everything begins to change. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. When you finally begin to prioritize yourself, not in a surface level, self-care kind of way, but from a deep soul-honoring place, something profound shifts within you. It's like an inner earthquake, silent, powerful, unshakable. You begin to feel, for the first time, that you are allowed to stop accepting emotional crumbs. You stop settling for relationships that feed your insecurity, friendships that drain your light, and situations that leave you questioning your worth. You no longer chase after people to fill the voids inside you because you start to realize those voids were never theirs to fill. They were invitations, quiet, sacred calls to return to yourself. You stop bending just to be liked, twisting just to fit into a mold that was never meant for you in the first place. And in that moment, when you choose, something magical happens. Healing starts to flow like water breaking through a dam. The people who used to exhaust you emotionally, they start to fade into the background. The situations that once had the power to unravel, you begin to lose their grip. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You've stopped looking for love, approval, and peace in all the wrong places. You've turned inward and you've remembered that the most powerful, most reliable source of love is already within you. And that realization, that's where true freedom is born. It's the kind of freedom that doesn't depend on anyone clapping for you or choosing you. It's the quiet but radical understanding that your well-being, your joy, your peace, none of it relies on someone else's behavior, opinion, or permission. It's yours. Always has been. But let's not sugarcoat this journey. It's not a magical overnight switch. It takes raw courage to prioritize yourself in a world that profits from your self-doubt. It takes relentless honesty to face your wounds and stop pretending they don't exist. It takes patience to unlearn the lie that says putting yourself first is selfish. And perhaps hardest of all, it takes strength to say no when you've spent years saying yes just to keep the peace. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you ignored that gentle voice inside you? How many times have you silenced your intuition, all because you didn't want to disappoint someone else? How often have you sacrificed your peace just to avoid conflict, or stayed in relationships where your heart felt invisible? Carl Jung warned us, the cost of ignoring ourselves is steep. It's not just emotional, it's soul deep. We pay for it with anxiety that won't go away, with a gnawing emptiness that success can't fill, with a life that looks fine on the outside but feels disconnected on the inside. But when you finally start listening to yourself, truly listening, you'll notice something beautiful. The world no longer feels so chaotic. People don't trigger you the same way. Relationships aren't such a battle anymore. Why? Because you've stopped fighting yourself. Healing, as it turns out, isn't some grand finish line we race toward. It's not a prize, it's a process, a daily decision, a practice of choosing yourself again and again, even when it feels uncomfortable, especially when it feels unfamiliar. And here's the miracle: when you keep choosing yourself, without guilt, without apology, life does change. Not because everyone around you suddenly transforms, but because you begin to see everything through clearer, more self-loving eyes. The peace you spent years searching for outside, it was always waiting inside. You just needed to believe you were worthy of it. And that belief is where the real transformation begins. The journey truly starts when you let go of what no longer resonates with your soul. When you give yourself permission to walk away from what hurts, even if it once felt like home. It's not easy. Letting go never is. But it's the only path to a life of authenticity, fulfillment, and emotional freedom. Are you ready to take that step? Because when you do, you'll begin to see things you never noticed before. The patterns, the imbalances, the one-sided relationships where you were doing all the work, the moments where you tolerated the intolerable just to avoid being alone. But that clarity, it's not a curse, it's a blessing. It's the moment the light finally breaks through. As Jung so wisely said, everything we repress, every need, every truth, every hurt doesn't disappear. It simply hides, waiting to be seen. And if we don't meet those parts of ourselves with compassion, the world will keep reflecting them to us through pain, through repeated lessons, through heartbreak, until we choose to face them. But when you finally decide to choose yourself, your peace, your voice, your truth, you don't just heal, you evolve. You reclaim the life that was always meant for you. This is the part of the journey that so many people resist. Because, let's be honest, it's not comfortable. It requires a kind of radical self-honesty that most of us were never taught. It means looking back and realizing that what we once called love may have only been attachment, a desperate grasp for closeness rooted in fear, not freedom. That what we thought was friendship may have simply been convenient shared time, not shared souls. And that so many of our choices, from the way we show up in relationships to the way we abandon ourselves, were driven by one haunting belief: I am not enough. But here's the truth that changed everything for me. When you start prioritizing yourself, you stop settling. You stop sacrificing your sanity for temporary comfort. You stop negotiating your peace just to avoid conflict. And most importantly, you stop holding on to what was never meant to be sustained in the first place. Then something happens, something that scares a lot of people. You begin to lose others, not because you've become cold or distant, but because you finally stop tolerating what used to drain you. You no longer agree to be someone's emotional punching bag. You no longer beg to be seen, heard, or chosen. And yes, it hurts. It does. People who once felt essential to your happiness begin to slowly drift away, some without a single word, some with silence that speaks louder than any goodbye. What feels like abandonment at first begins to feel like liberation. Every time someone walks out of your life, they create space for someone more aligned, more intentional, and more real. Still, let's not pretend this process is smooth. The unconscious mind hates change. It clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. Because pain, can feel safer than healing. You don't understand. That's why so many people stay stuck in toxic cycles, repeating patterns, recycling relationships that no longer grow them. Not because they don't want better, but because the unknown feels terrifying. But listen carefully. This is where real transformation begins. Not when you fight for what's falling apart, but when you release what was never yours to carry. Letting go doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean forgetting overnight. It doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means finally accepting the truth that you can't make someone love you, respect you, or stay. You can't force someone to see your value if they refuse to open their eyes. And most of all, you can't keep abandoning yourself just to be accepted by someone else. At some point, life splits into two roads. One leads you further away from yourself, into the endless pursuit of approval, into exhaustion, into resentment. The other, it takes you inward. It leads to self-respect, to emotional clarity, to peace. And that's the road where healing begins, not because everything around you gets easier, but because you get stronger, wiser, and more aligned. Carl Jung reminds us, the path to wholeness is not easy, but it's the only one worth walking. It's the path of authenticity, the one where you no longer shrink to fit into someone else's story, but instead begin writing your own. It's the path where you stop apologizing for who you are and finally start becoming who you were always meant to be. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And the beauty of choosing yourself is this: as your energy shifts, so do your relationships. The people who only came around when it was convenient, they quietly fade. But in their absence, something beautiful happens. People who genuinely value you begin to appear. People who don't take from you, but pour into you. Connections that don't demand your silence, but celebrate your voice. Relationships are built not on sacrifice, but on mutual respect and truth. Because when you stop begging for love, you make room for the kind of love that never needed convincing in the first place. Because when you finally begin to value yourself, not in theory, but in the deepest, most honest parts of your soul, you stop accepting less than what you truly deserve. You stop tolerating half-effort love, inconsistent friendships, and the endless cycle of proving your worth to people who were never capable of seeing you. But let's be real, most people never get to this point. Not because they don't want to, but because letting go hurts. And it doesn't just hurt because of what we lose on the outside. It hurts because it forces us to confront the part of ourselves that kept allowing certain patterns, the part that stayed quiet when we wanted to scream, that kept giving even when we were empty, that feared being alone more than it feared being disrespected. It's always easier to blame others, to point fingers and say, they used me, they didn't love me, they didn't appreciate me. But as Carl Jung reminds us, everything we experience, especially the painful recurring patterns, is ultimately a reflection of our own inner world. Until we choose to face what's inside, we will keep replaying the same story, just with different characters. And this is where the concept of the shadow becomes so important. Jung said that each of us carries a hidden side parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. The fear of abandonment, the ache for validation, the anger we were taught to suppress, the insecurities we've buried under layers of overachievement or perfectionism. These are the aspects of ourselves that society, family, and even religion told us were unacceptable. So we pushed them down, out of sight but never out of power. Because here's the truth: your shadow doesn't disappear just because you deny it. The more you ignore it, the stronger it becomes. It shows up in your romantic choices, in your emotional triggers, in the way you react to conflict. It whispers behind your decisions, silently directing your life until you finally decide to meet it face to face. When you begin to prioritize yourself, you start to see the shadow. You start noticing how often you say yes when your soul is screaming no. You catch yourself shrinking, pleasing, fixing, overcompensating, all in an attempt to feel loved or safe. And in that moment, you are faced with a life-changing decision. Will you continue living in unconsciousness, repeating the same wounds, disguised as different situations? Or will you take the terrifying but powerful step towards self-awareness, even if it means breaking everything that felt familiar? This is the cliff where many turn back, because facing your shadow requires radical honesty. It means admitting that you've stayed too long in situations that were slowly killing your spirit, that you've allowed people to take from you more than you could afford to give, that you accepted less than you deserved, Not because you were weak, but because deep down you believed that was all you were worthy of. But let me tell you something I've learned. The pain of facing your truth is temporary. The pain of denying it, that's a lifetime sentence. That's the ache that lingers in your chest when you're alone at night. That's the bitterness that builds when you give and wonder why no one ever shows up for you. The path to emotional healing begins the moment you stop running. The moment you stop blaming the world, your parents, your past, and start saying, what can I do differently? Healing happens when you remove the judgment and replace it with compassion. When you look in the mirror and say, I forgive myself. I didn't know better, but now I do. As Jung so wisely said, we cannot heal what we don't acknowledge. We cannot change what we're unwilling to accept. But the very second you decide to strip off the mask, stop performing, and finally tell yourself the truth, something cracks open inside you. That's when the real healing begins. That's when you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what am I ready to change? That's when you stop waiting for someone to save you and realize you've had the power to save yourself all along. And from that moment on, transformation is not just possible, it's inevitable. You start attracting new people, healthier conversations, more honest relationships. Not because you're suddenly lucky, but because you're no longer vibrating on a frequency of lack and pain. You've leveled up. You're no longer trying to squeeze yourself into spaces that don't fit you. You're no longer begging for crumbs when you were meant to feast at your own table. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all, the peace. That deep, unshakable peace that comes when you stop depending on anyone or anything outside of you to feel whole. The peace that comes when you realize that everything you've ever needed, security, love, clarity, power, it was always inside of you, waiting for you to stop searching and start remembering. The question is, are you willing to go through the fire to get there? Are you willing to feel the discomfort of shedding your past so you can make space for something better? Because if you're brave enough to do the work, then what waits for you on the other side is not just healing, it's freedom. It won't be easy, but let me tell you something from the heart. It will be worth it. Because the moment you start prioritizing yourself, a quiet miracle begins. Emotional healing no longer feels blocked or unreachable. It flows naturally, without barriers. And the world? It stops feeling like an enemy. It stops feeling like a battlefield. Instead, it starts to mirror your well-being, your calm, your clarity. But there's a shift that happens, one that's both powerful and a little scary. When you begin choosing yourself, something inevitable takes place. You change. And when you change, the people around you don't always celebrate. Some will cheer you on with love, others will grow silent. Some may question your choices, and a few might try to guilt you back into the version of you that made them more comfortable. This is one of the hardest thresholds to cross, the moment you realize not everyone in your life is ready for the new you. And many people, sadly, retreat here. They slip back into familiar patterns. They return to relationships that no longer nourish their soul. They agree once again to stay small, not because they don't crave freedom, but because the idea of losing the familiar feels more terrifying than staying stuck. But here's a truth you need to hear and hold close. If you have to shrink to fit into someone's life, that place was never meant for you. You weren't born to be palatable. You weren't created to dim your light, just so others don't have to squint. Carl Jung taught us something sacred, something few are willing to live by: individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are is not a path everyone will understand. And that's okay. This path wasn't designed to be walked with the whole crowd. Sometimes it's walked in silence. Sometimes it's walked alone. One of the greatest illusions we've been fed is the idea that loneliness is a failure, that if we find ourselves walking solo, it means we're broken or unlovable or Wrong. But that's a lie. The real problem isn't being alone. It's not knowing how to be with ourselves. And Jung reminds us of this, that the journey to wholeness demands a season of deep introspection. It demands that we stop grasping at outside sources to fill us up, and instead begin searching within. And when we finally become comfortable in our own company, when we make peace with the silence, we stop tolerating just anything to avoid being alone. This is where many encounter what Jung called the night of the soul, a sacred, painful, transformative period where everything old begins to crumble. But the new hasn't quite taken shape yet. It's a void, a place of emotional fog, a terrifying in-between where certainty vanishes and all the scaffolding we built our identity on collapses. And this is where most people give up, because the human mind craves answers. It aches for clarity, structure, something to hold on to. But real growth doesn't come with guarantees. It comes when you dare to sit in the unknown, without trying to rush back to comfort. It comes when you resist the urge to numb the discomfort with old habits, and instead let yourself feel. Because in this space of unlearning, you begin to realize something earth-shattering. So much of who you thought you were was built around other people's needs. Your value, wrapped in being needed. Your identity, defined by being accepted. Your energy, spent trying to keep the peace, to be enough, to be approved of. And when all of that falls away, you're left with one soul-piercing question. Who am I when no one is watching? For Jung, the answer to that question lives in integration. It's not about becoming perfect or polished. It's about becoming whole. About embracing not just your light, but your shadow. Not just your joy, but your pain. Not just the self you post for others to see, but the one that cries in the dark and dares to hope anyway. When you stop running from yourself, when you stop lying to yourself, even with good intentions, something inside of you changes. The hunger for approval? It fades. The need to belong in every room? It softens. The urge to please at the cost of your soul? It loses its grip. And that's when you finally begin to feel free. But don't think the journey stops there. Because once you begin this new chapter, the world will test you. Old situations will return to see if you've truly healed. Old relationships will knock just to see if the door is still open. People who once manipulated your kindness may try again, hoping you're still available in the same ways. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And you'll know whether you've truly transformed, not because the world looks different, but because you respond differently. You won't need to defend your worth. You won't feel obligated to explain your evolution. You'll understand deep in your bones that not every connection is meant to last forever, and letting go isn't failure, it's alignment. The energy you once spent trying to earn love, you now pour into yourself. And although it might feel foreign at first, I promise it's the most powerful act of self-love you can ever choose. Because when you decide to prioritize yourself, you begin to notice things you used to overlook. You recognize that life isn't random. It's not a string of disconnected events. It's a mirror one that constantly reflects the relationship you have with your soul. And if you keep attracting people who don't value you, if you find yourself over-giving, over-proving, and still feeling unseen pause and ask, what part of me still believes I'm not enough? Because the real answer, it was never outside of you. When you do the inner work, when you face your patterns, love your flaws, speak your truth, something incredible happens. Life stops feeling like a battle. Anxiety about the future begins to fade because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. Relationships stop feeling like survival and start to feel like growth. And the most powerful shift of all, you take your power back. Not with rage, not with ego, but with quiet certainty. With grace, this journey doesn't promise perfection. Prioritizing yourself doesn't mean you'll never again feel fear, insecurity, or doubt creeping in. Life still brings its storms. But what changes, what truly transforms, is that now you have the emotional tools to weather them. You no longer let those emotions dominate your decisions. You don't spiral from fear, you witness it. You don't chase love from a place of desperation. You offer it from a place of fullness. Because you're no longer living in lack, you're living in abundance. You're not running anymore. Not from your pain, not from your past, not from yourself. Carl Jung didn't teach us to eliminate pain. He taught us something far more profound, that healing comes from integration. From looking at our wounds, not with shame or resistance, but with grace, with understanding, with open arms. Our healing begins when we stop trying to escape what hurt us and instead learn to give it meaning. And when you allow yourself to do that, when you stop avoiding and start embracing, you break the grip the past has held over you. You stop mourning what's gone and start inhabiting what's real, the present. Because the present moment, this very moment, is where life lives. It's where peace is found, not in the absence of problems, but in the steady, quiet truth that you can hold yourself through anything. You don't need to seek approval to feel grounded. That you, exactly as you are enough. This is the sacred reward of choosing yourself. You don't just regain your energy, your time, your sense of peace. You recover something far more precious, your authenticity. And it's from that place, raw, real, unpolished, that emotional healing begins to flow. No more walls, no more pretending, no more hiding. Just you, being you. Because when you finally stop living according to what the world expects and start living as who you truly are, something shifts. Life no longer feels like resistance. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of your truth. And when you prioritize yourself deeply and consistently, you begin to see that much of your past suffering didn't come from the world itself, but from the painful stories you were taught to believe. Stories that whispered, you have to try harder to be loved. You have to earn your place. You must constantly prove your worth to deserve kindness. But the moment, the sacred moment, you begin to question those stories, the fog starts to lift. You see the truth more clearly than ever. It was never your responsibility to carry what never belonged to you. Jung reminds us that the collective unconscious, the ideas and emotional patterns we inherit from generations before us, is full of unexamined beliefs about love, about success, about sacrifice, about identity. And unless we pause to question them, we'll keep replaying stories that were never ours to begin with. That's where awakening begins, not with answers, but with questions. Why do I believe I have to suffer to be worthy of love? Why do I tolerate dynamics that leave me depleted? Why do I stay in spaces that strip me of my peace? These questions aren't easy. They demand we revisit our past with new eyes. Maybe you grew up watching a parent who gave endlessly and never received. And now you equate love with self-sacrifice. Maybe you were praised only when you were busy, productive, achieving, and now you feel guilt every time you rest. Maybe you were taught that strength meant endurance, that letting go meant weakness, and now you cling to what no longer serves you, even when it hurts. But here's a liberating truth. You can unlearn it all. You can choose new truths, new paths, new ways of loving yourself and others. You are not condemned to live out the same story just because it's familiar. Jung reminds us that destiny is not written in stone. It is shaped by our consciousness. And when you choose to expand your awareness, you don't just change your mindset, you change your entire reality. Suddenly you realize love should not be a battlefield. Peace shouldn't feel unreachable. Happiness shouldn't be dependent on someone else's validation. And worth? Worth isn't something you earn. It's something you already are. That's where real transformation begins. The people who once held power over you The ones whose opinions could shake your core begin to lose that grip. The situations that once triggered your anxiety, they no longer carry the same weight. Not because the world suddenly got easier, but because you changed the way you show up in it. You stopped trying to be understood by people who never cared to listen. You stopped forcing yourself to belong where your spirit was never welcomed. You stopped trying to rescue relationships that are meant to stay in your past. And that, my friend, that is freedom. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the soft, grounded kind. The freedom of no longer needing the outside world to complete you. The security of being able to sit with yourself in stillness and not feel empty. The quiet confidence that no matter what happens, you will be okay because you finally know how to be there for you. That's the gift. That's the transformation. That's the power of choosing yourself. Carl Jung said that individuation is the most important process of our human existence, the sacred path to integration, to wholeness, to becoming who we truly are. But make no mistake, this path isn't paved with comfort or ease. It's often filled with pain, loss, solitude, and a haunting silence that asks you to listen to your soul like never before. And yet, it is the only path that can lead you to a life that feels deeply meaningful, a life that feels like yours. When you begin to prioritize yourself, not the polished version you show the world, but your real, raw, unfiltered self, something divine begins to unfold. When you make the brave choice to let go of the old identities that existed only to please others, something incredible happens. Life begins to reward you. New people enter your world, people who see you, hear you, feel you not for who you pretended to be, but for who you are. Opportunities that once felt impossible suddenly start appearing. Doors you never knocked on begin to open. And above all, an unfamiliar but powerful peace settles into your spirit. A peace you've never truly felt before, because for the first time, you've stopped waging war with yourself. You're no longer searching outside for what's always been within. You're no longer trying to earn your right to exist. You're simply being, and that is awakening. This is the moment where many people say, I finally feel alive. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real. Because life is no longer about surviving, pleasing, or performing. It becomes about experiencing, creating, feeling, living from a place of truth, not fear. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment on number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. But let's be honest, the work doesn't stop there. Self-love isn't a destination. Consciousness is not a one-time choice. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it requires constant attention, nourishment, and effort. Because even after your transformation begins, the world will try to pull you back. Family, friends, society, they'll remind you of your old self. They'll try to make you feel guilty for evolving. They'll label your peace as selfishness. They'll ask why you're so different, why you've changed. But the difference now is that you know the truth. Your peace is priceless. Your well-being is non-negotiable. And your wholeness is not up for debate. At the end of the day, the only decisions that matter are the ones that bring you closer to yourself, closer to your truth, closer to the life you were born to live. Because here's the magic. The world changes when you change. Your relationships improve when you improve the relationship you have with yourself. Opportunities flow when you stop acting from fear and start showing up from abundance. Jung teaches us that the unconscious mind responds to our most deeply rooted beliefs. When you truly believe you deserve better, not just in your mind, but in your heart, in your body, in your energy, the universe responds. Life starts echoing that belief. It shows you what you were always worthy of, but didn't yet claim. The question is, are you ready to see it? Are you ready to release what no longer resonates with your soul? To stop clinging to what has expired just because it's familiar? To open yourself completely to the possibility of something radically better? It won't be easy, but I promise you, it will be so worth it. Because when you finally choose yourself, when you stop betraying your soul to make others comfortable, something beautiful happens. Healing flows without resistance. Life no longer feels like something you endure. It becomes a reflection of your truth. And here's the curious part: when you start living from your authenticity, the things that once confused you become clear. The relationships you used to fight to maintain begin to feel heavy. The situations you used to justify no longer make sense. This isn't a coincidence. It's growth. It's the sacred sign that your soul is evolving. You're awakening to the truth that has been whispering to you for years. You were never meant to live a life of suppression, of shrinking, of silent suffering. Jung taught us that consciousness is not fixed. It expands, but only when we dare to look inward. And when that expansion happens, you can no longer tolerate the lies you once lived in. The outer world must change because the inner world has shifted. Clarity on the inside creates clarity on the outside. Chaos within, you'll find chaos mirrored back to you. But peace within, you'll begin attracting peace without even trying. That's why prioritizing yourself changes everything. You start attracting situations, relationships, and experiences that match your new vibration. You no longer chase love. You become love. You no longer force connections. You allow alignment. You no longer beg for respect. You embody it. Everything begins to flow, not because life got easier, but because you stopped betraying yourself. Now, let's not romanticize this. This change doesn't happen overnight. There will be days when you question it all. There will be lonely moments where the temptation to go back to the old ways feels suffocating. There will be memories that tug at your heart. And in those moments, you'll face a sacred test. Will you betray yourself just to avoid being alone? Or will you stay loyal to your truth, even when the silence is deafening? This is the edge most people back away from. But Jung reminds us the unconscious always tests us, not to punish us, but to see if we're ready, to see if we're serious about the next level. Because healing isn't a performance, it's a commitment. And just when you think you've moved on, someone from the past might reappear. A situation you thought you mastered may rise again, not because you failed, but because you're being asked, will you choose differently this time? And when you do, when you finally say no to what once broke you, when you honor your boundaries, when you choose your peace over your past, everything shifts. Your energy changes. Your self-respect becomes magnetic. You are no longer tied to survival. You are living, breathing, choosing from wholeness. And that, right there, is your breakthrough. You're no longer anchored in fear, no longer shackled by the constant hunger for approval, and no longer sitting around waiting for someone to validate your path before you feel worthy to walk it. And that changes everything. Because when you finally release the need to be chosen, the world begins to respond in ways you never expected. Opportunities that once felt out of reach begin to arrive, not through force, but through alignment. The people who now step into your life come with different energy. They're no longer looking to take. They're coming to respect, to admire, to support, because you've finally taught the world how to treat you by how you've decided to treat yourself. What once seemed unattainable, unrealistic, or too much now begins to manifest with ease, not because the world suddenly changed, but because you did. Because deep down, you've finally allowed yourself to believe that you deserve more. And this is where so many people describe their awakening. That beautiful, grounding realization that every ounce of pain they endured, every heartbreak, every rejection, every moment of not enoughness was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to reveal them. It all had a purpose, to bring them to this exact point, to this version of themselves, to this moment of truth. Yes, pain is never easy. It leaves scars. But when you look back with wiser eyes, you begin to see that every fall was a redirection. Every closed door was divine protection. Every time you were pushed to your edge, you were invited to rise. Carl Jung reminds us that the unconscious never forgets, but it can heal. The wounds of the past don't just vanish, but they don't have to control us anymore. They don't have to be shackles that keep us small. They can become reminders, sacred symbols of how far we've come, of how deeply we've grown. Because when you stop seeing your life as a series of failures and begin seeing it as a sacred path of evolution, everything shifts. But here's the heartbreak of it all. Most people never reach this place. They stay trapped in the stories of what could have been. They get caught in cycles of resentment, nostalgia, guilt haunted by their past, and wishing things had gone differently. They carry the weight of old wounds like armor, not realizing that healing is always within reach. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment on number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. But the truth is this: your real power is not in what happened to you, but in what you choose to create from this moment on. When you begin to prioritize yourself genuinely, unapologetically, you stop living in the past. You stop trying to rewrite what's already been written. You no longer feel the need to explain why you stayed too long, why you gave too much, or why you allowed yourself to be broken. Because you finally understand everything that happened for a reason. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because every experience shaped you into someone wiser, stronger, deeper. You stop mourning the past. You start honoring it. You accept it not as your prison, but as your preparation. And this is where life gets really interesting. Because when you free yourself from the heavy chains of what was, you realize something breathtaking. The future is wide open. There's no fixed script. There's no final verdict. There's no destiny carved in stone. There's only one possibility. Endless, expansive, soul-stirring possibility. And the only question that remains is this: what will you do with your freedom? Will you stay tethered to old pain, retelling stories that keep you small? Or will you finally step forward into your power and write something entirely new? The truth is that most people choose safety. They choose the known, even when it hurts. They stay in the roles they've outgrown because they're afraid of the unknown, afraid of disappointing others, of standing alone, of feeling lost. But those who dare, those rare, brave souls who decide to prioritize themselves, even when it shakes the ground beneath them, discover something extraordinary. They find that when you choose to live from authenticity, when you stop performing and start being, life opens up in ways more beautiful than they ever imagined. Not perfect, not painless, but real, honest, deeply fulfilling. Because the moment you decide to be fully, unapologetically yourself, life finally meets you there. Because when you choose yourself, something extraordinary begins to happen. The world chooses you too. When you finally see your worth, life responds in kind. It mirrors that energy back to you with more opportunities, more peace, and more people who reflect the love and respect you've started offering to yourself. And when you let go of what no longer serves your soul, when you release what was never meant to stay, something beautiful and undeniable happens. What is meant for you finds its way. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's alignment. It's the sacred, unshakable law of energy. What you cultivate within you, you attract around you. It's the universe responding to the vibration of your healing, your growth, and our quiet but powerful decision to finally be true to yourself. Because when you make that decision truly and wholeheartedly, life begins to take a completely different course. You no longer cling to what hurts. You no longer chase after people who can't see your value. You stop performing, stop convincing, stop questioning whether you're enough. Because deep inside, in the stillness of your soul, you know that you are. You no longer seek outside validation because you've come home to yourself. You've realized the truth that so many spend a lifetime avoiding. Everything you've ever needed has always been within you. But let's be honest, this path isn't always easy. There will be days when the old pain whispers louder than your new wisdom. There will be moments when doubt creeps in, when the weight of your past tries to pull you back into old, familiar patterns. There will be times when the silence feels unbearable and your progress feels invisible. But the difference now is this: you know better. You know that your peace is priceless, your well-being is non-negotiable, and your worth has never depended on anyone's opinion, approval, or applause. And that changes everything. Jung reminds us that the true purpose of life isn't superficial happiness. It's wholeness, not the shiny kind you post online, but the raw, messy, beautiful wholeness that comes from embracing all of you, your light, your shadows, your pain, your progress. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. It means becoming who you are, underneath all the masks, the fears, and the roles you've played to survive. When you reach this sacred place within yourself, something powerful happens. You stop begging to be accepted. You stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never built for your truth. You no longer seek approval. You seek connection. You no longer try to fit in, you crave belonging. And that kind of belonging only happens when you're finally willing to show up as yourself, unfiltered, unapologetic, unafraid. Because the world doesn't need another version of who you were trained to be. It needs you, fully. It needs the truth you carry, the love you embody, the authenticity you fought to reclaim. So yes, the path is hard. Yes, it asks everything of you, but I promise you this, it gives back so much more. So now, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what part of this message spoke to you the most? What truth did your heart whisper as you listened? Because healing begins not just when we hear something powerful, but when we take that wisdom and turn it into action. So I invite you, comment below and share one thing you've learned from this video, something you're ready to bring into your own life. Maybe it's setting boundaries. Maybe it's releasing an old belief. Maybe it's simply the decision to finally choose you. Whatever it is, your words might be the encouragement someone else needs today. Let's grow together. And if you found value in this video, if it stirred something in your soul, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Because when we heal together, we rise together. And this journey to wholeness, it's one we don't have to walk alone. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep choosing yourself again and again.